In the dry, unforgiving lands of Africa, in a small village, 10-year-old Kofi and his mother were fighting to survive. Kofi was the only male in his family, but he had long stopped being just a child. His father had been killed by armed invaders who attacked their village, leaving behind nothing but painful memories. From that moment on, Kofi had no choice but to carry burdens far beyond his years. Every responsibility that once belonged to his father was now his. Each morning, Kofi's first task was fetching water, but the water was never clean. It was murky, filled with dirt and bacteria. The entire village had no choice but to drink from the same contaminated source. Every day, Kofi carried heavy buckets of water for his mother, knowing that each sip was poisoning her body. She grew weaker with each passing day, barely able to get out of bed. Every gulp of that filthy water pulled her closer to the edge. Yet Kofi was helpless. He was just a boy, and the weight of his mother's life was crushing him. His mother's illness worsened by the day. She could no longer eat, and her hands trembled as she reached out to touch her son's face. She had lost so much strength that even speaking became difficult. One night, Kofi sat beside her, holding her fragile hands. He had boiled the water, hoping it would help, but deep down, he knew it wouldn't. He looked into her tired eyes and whispered, "Mother, I will make you better. I promise." His mother smiled weakly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In a barely audible voice, she whispered back, "You are so strong, Kofi. Your father would be proud of you. But remember, real strength is not about fighting. It is about giving others hope." That night, Kofi didn't sleep. He held his mother's hand, watching over her, hoping she would wake up to see another sunrise. But when morning came, she was gone. The last piece of family he had was taken from him. As the sun rose over the village, Kofi remained still, his small body weighed down by unbearable grief. His silent tears fell into the dry earth beneath him, swallowed by the land that had already taken so much from him. He was now completely alone. A few weeks after his mother's passing, an unusual commotion stirred in the village. Large vehicles rolled in, bringing unfamiliar faces. Water tankers, filtration systems, and engineers arrived, drawing whispers among the villagers. There was a mixture of curiosity and hope in their eyes. The news was almost too incredible to believe. Bill Gates himself had come to oversee a clean water project in their village. For years, the villagers had been trapped in a cycle of disease and desperation due to contaminated water. This moment felt like a miracle. Mothers clutched their children, elders shed quiet tears of relief, and people gathered in groups, murmuring words of gratitude. Finally, they would no longer have to fear the water that had taken so many lives. But Kofi stood apart from the celebration, watching from a distance. While others raised their hands in joy, his heart felt heavier than ever. The clean water had arrived, but it was too late for his mother. He clenched his small hands together, his bare feet pressed into the dusty ground, his head hanging low. The very thing that could have saved her was now flowing freely through the village, yet she wasn't here to see it. A few steps away, Bill Gates was deep in conversation with the villagers, explaining how the water systems worked and discussing future plans with the engineers. But amidst the joyful crowd, his eyes caught sight of a boy, alone, unmoving. Unlike the other children, who were laughing and running around excitedly, this boy sat still. There was something in his posture, something in the way he stared blankly at the ground. Gates felt an unexpected pull. He had seen poverty, loss, and hardship many times before, but this was different. This child carried something beyond sadness. He carried a silence that spoke louder than words. Without hesitation, Gates stepped away from the crowd and made his way toward him. He crouched down in front of the boy and offered a gentle smile. "Hey there, little one. What's your name?" Kofi didn't lift his head. No one had asked his name in weeks. No one had spoken to him, unless it was to offer empty condolences or tell him to move along. But there was something different about this man's voice. It wasn't commanding, nor was it filled with forced sympathy. It was steady, calm, and warm. Slowly, Kofi raised his gaze, his dark eyes meeting Gates for the first time. For a brief moment, he saw something in them, something real. In a barely audible whisper, he answered, "Kofi." Bill Gates nodded slightly, recognizing the weight behind such a simple response. He could already see the exhaustion in the boy's face, the burden of grief pressing down on his small frame. "Tell me, Kofi," he asked softly, "why do you look so sad?" Kofi hesitated. No one had asked him that before, but as he sat there, feeling the warmth of another human being truly listening, something inside him cracked. His lips trembled, his breath hitched, and then, like a dam breaking, his pain poured out. "My father is dead. They attacked our village. They took him away. It was just me and my mother. I was supposed to protect her, but I was too small. I wasn't strong enough." He sucked in a sharp breath, his voice breaking. "Every day I brought her water, but it was always dirty. She drank it, and she got sick. She got weaker and weaker. I watched her slip away right in front of me, and I couldn't do anything to stop it." His small shoulders shook as silent tears rolled down his cheeks, falling onto the parched earth. Bill Gates felt his chest tighten. He had helped millions of people, funded life-changing projects, and transformed entire communities. But nothing could have prepared him for the raw pain in this boy's voice. Then Kofi looked up again, his tear-filled eyes searching for something. An answer, an explanation, a reason for his suffering. "Everyone is happy today," he whispered. "The water is here, but my mother will never see it. This water, it could have saved her. But now, it's too late." Gates reached out and gently took the boy's small hands in his. He could see the strength within Kofi, even if the boy himself didn't realize it yet. "Kofi," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you have been through more than any child should ever have to bear. You had to grow up too fast, but listen to me. Your father and mother would be so proud of you. And strength, true strength, is not just about survival. Sometimes, the greatest strength is in bringing hope to others." Kofi sniffled, nodding slightly, but the emptiness in his chest remained. He was still alone. And that was the moment Bill Gates made a decision that would change the boy's life forever. But he didn't want to overwhelm him just yet. Instead, he smiled gently, placed a hand on Kofi's shoulder, and said, "Walk with me, Kofi. There's something I want to talk to you about." And with that, the first chapter of Kofi's new life had begun. He just didn't know it yet. Gates placed a reassuring hand on Kofi's shoulder and looked deep into his eyes. "You are a very special child, Kofi. Surviving all this is already an achievement. But you shouldn't just survive. You should live. You should learn. You should dream." Kofi struggled to grasp the meaning behind Gates's words. Then, Gates asked a question that would change everything. "Would you like to come to America?" Kofi's eyes widened in shock. "Why?" Gates gave him a small smile. "Because I want to give you a scholarship. We will cover all your expenses. You will study, learn, and build your own future." It was the most unbelievable thing Kofi had ever heard. For so long, his world had been confined to his village, to the struggle of each passing day. And now, this man was offering him something unimaginable. But it was terrifying too. Would he have to leave behind his mother's grave, his village, everything he had ever known? Yet deep inside, he felt something. Perhaps this was the new beginning his mother had always wanted for him. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding, and then he nodded. Yes. 8 years later, a young man sat at his desk, completely focused on the lines of code appearing on his computer screen. He was no longer a child. He was no longer alone. Kofi had made it. He was now a successful university student at one of the most prestigious institutions in America. And more than that, he was interning at Microsoft, the very company that had shaped the world of technology. That day, in the company's headquarters, its founder was working in his office when a knock came at the door. A young man stepped inside. "Mr. Gates, I was told I could see you." Bill Gates lifted his head from his work and looked up at him. A warm smile spread across his face. "Kofi, it's good to see you. How are you?" Kofi smiled back and extended his hand. "I just wanted to say, thank you for changing my life." Gates shook his hand firmly, his expression one of quiet pride. "You were already ready to change, Kofi. I just opened the door." And on that day, a story that had begun with dirty waters and hardship ended with success, hope, and the brightest of futures.